Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all well. This is where I talk about the books that I'm reading. I like to read diverse books and I highlight Canadian literature. If you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. It has been a while, but today I am going to work on catching up. I know it's already November, but I will be talking about all of the books that I finished in September. Now, there's been a lot going on, all good things, some of it even bookish things, but it has also meant less time for reading and booktube in the last couple of months. So in September, I read 7 books, which is more than I thought, actually. I read Love by Toni Morrison as part of the series that I'm doing with my friend AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes. I am way behind on this now, and I have to redo this video, and hopefully I will get to that soon and then slowly get back on track with that. We only have a few books left to read for that series, so I will be talking more in depth about Love. So please check that out, and I will also leave the playlist below as well if you want to see all of the Toni Morrison novels that we have read so far. Spoiler that this one's not my favorite. So this leaves 6 books to still talk about, and I'm going to start with 2 Canadian books. One that I had hoped would be longlisted for the Giller, and one that was longlisted and then actually shortlisted for the Giller Prize. So first up was this massive novel, it's huge, Fayne by Anne-Marie MacDonald, who is one of my favorite Canadian authors, and I would say one of my all-time just favorite authors. I've enjoyed all of the books that I've read by her, and I gave this book a 5-star rating. This kind of reminds me a bit of Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, which I also loved. Although they are 2 very different stories, I am comparing them because they deal with similar themes of identity, and it's about secrets and the people who love and care for the main character. So this story, Fayne, takes place in the late 1800s, and I loved the setting. It begins on an estate called Fayne that is literally on the border of Scotland and England. And I think one of my favorite things about the story was that Fayne and its surroundings become a character in the book. You know, I love that. The idea of it straddling 2 countries to me is significant. As we learn more about the main character and the world that is created within and around the estate, that's also important. And it has some mystery to it. It seems to hold memories somehow, and there is perhaps even a bit of magic. The main character is Charlotte Bell. She's a pre-teen, and she lives in this estate with her father. She's aware that her mother died giving birth to her, and her older brother Charles died when she was just 2 years old. And these 2 characters, the mother and the brother, although they are dead, they somehow are still very present and significant to the story. And although Charlotte has been kept from the world by her father and only really knows the estate, she seems to be a very happy child. She's very intelligent, she likes exploring and learning, and her father, who loves her, wants to have her educated, and he hires a tutor. And then that's when things begin to get complicated and unravel a little bit. Charlotte starts to question her father. And I could go on about this for a long time, but I don't want to give spoilers. And I will say that although I could figure out some things before they actually happened or before they were revealed, and I guessed, at some of the things that were going to happen, that didn't stop me from loving this book. I still appreciated how Anne-Marie MacDonald brought the story together. The characters were interesting, the setting was interesting, and I loved the writing. She's a brilliant writer. So even though it is a huge book, it didn't feel like a slog. And as I said, I had hoped that this would have been long listed for the Giller, but that's okay. And I've already read most of the short list now, and so far, like, this book is still better than the ones that I've read. But so that brings me to the next book, The Islands, by Dionne Irving. This has been shortlisted for the Giller Prize. It is a collection of short stories, and the common theme or thread in all of them, I would say, is colonization and otherness. The stories are mostly about Jamaican women who have immigrated to other places like the US or Canada, Britain, I think. So story collections for me can be a hit or miss. I liked these stories. I thought they were well written, but nothing has really stuck with me. I gave the collection a 3.5 star rating, and I rounded that up on Goodreads because I definitely think that there's some good things about the collection. I think what may have been the case for me, which sometimes happens with short stories, is I didn't get enough character building or story for it to make an impact. While reading it, I think it was fine, but I have very few images or storylines that I can kind of think back to. So I would definitely read something else from this author, perhaps with a novel and more focus on one story. I think I might like that more. So we will see how this goes for the Giller Prize. The next book that I read was Daughters of Sparta by Claire Heywood. This is another debut, and it is a retelling of the classic Greek mythology of Helen of Troy, who I am a bit familiar with. I have to be honest, though, that Greek mythology is outside of my usual reading and not something that I really gravitate towards. From the little that I know about Helen, and I know even less about her sister, Clytemnestra, something like that, or her half-sister, I guess. From what I can tell, the difference here is that the retelling is that the story is told from their perspective. And I do like when writers give voice to women who in history have had no voice. The story is about family, marriage, betrayal, war. But for me, because of how the story is told, it's really about these characters. And I think in some ways takes for granted that you already know all of the other details. So this is a very character-driven novel, which I don't mind. But for me, this was okay. I liked it, but I didn't love it. Next is a book that's been on my shelf for a very long time, and I was first drawn to it because of the cover. I love this cover. Since seeing this cover, I've seen other similar covers using this idea, but this one has always struck me. So Wilder Girls by Rory Power is considered YA, I think because the characters are young and in school. They are at an all-girls boarding school. This started off very strong for me. The premise sounded so good. I have enjoyed dark academia in the past, and I thought that I would really like this, and I was hoping to add this to a list of favorites. Basically, the story is about these girls at the school, which is on an island, by the way, and they are in quarantine because there is a pandemic that they call the Tox. It has killed all of the teachers and several of the students. It has caused mutations. And outside the school, there are animals that have also become mutated. And there's descriptions of this. I think this is why it's also categorized as horror. Some of the descriptions were very detailed, and some of it was quite disgusting. But if you like horror, then it's kind of expected, and I thought it was done very well. My issue with the book was that it started off good and then it lagged. Then it got good again because things started happening and I was expecting it to kind of go somewhere. But the ending was disappointing to me, and I never really actually connected to any of the characters to really care enough about them. I didn't find myself wanting to return to the book. So this was another book that was just okay for me. But I have to go back to the cover, and I have to say that this is probably my favorite thing about the whole book. So that leaves 2 books, and they cannot be any more different than each other. First up is a book from a series that I've been reading, and the last book is a non-fiction book that I read. Finley Donovan, Jumps the Gun by Elle Cosimano. This is the 3rd book in the Finley Donovan series, and unfortunately, what often happens for me at times, for me in series anyway, they fizzle out. I rated the first book 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. The second book I rated 4 stars. It was good. I didn't love it. And here we are at number 3, and you can probably guess, but I rated it 3 stars. So the enjoyment is dwindling. I can't say too much about this that I haven't said about the other 2 books, and I think that's part of the problem. So Finley Donovan, the main character, is a writer, and that seems trivial to this story at this point. However, she also gets mixed up in solving crime, which somehow also tends to involve her ex-husband, and she has a sidekick. It's her nanny. And while I like the main character and I like the idea of this because I thought it was well done in the first book, I could not have cared less about the crime and who did what, when, or where. I didn't care, and it's been so long since I finished it now that I don't even remember how it wrapped up, and I don't care about that either. There were a couple of funny lines, but it's just not enough for me to keep going with this series. I think, 3 books in, and I think I'm out. So let me know if you've read these, if you've read this series, and if I'm missing something, because I was really hoping to enjoy this and, find a new series that I liked. So last on my list for the September wrap-up is The Only Plane in the Sky, an oral history of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. This has been on my list ever since it first came out, and I started reading it this year, the day before the anniversary. Many of you already know that I love New York, and my first trip there was 3 weeks after 9/11. Ground Zero was still smoking. The city was, kind of moving beyond its paralysis and numbness. And I can't remember who, but I believe it was Kim at Middle of the Book March who recommended listening to the audio, which totally makes sense because it's an oral history. So I listened to that advice, and I'm really glad that I did. The audio is a cast of 45 or over 45 people, and I think they did a great job, and they take you through that whole day. I spent over 2 weeks with this book because even though I know this story, there were some really moving and difficult parts. I also learned about a number of things. Like how they used the boats on the Hudson River. I hadn't even thought of that. And the stories are from very different people, from everyday people to celebrities, to survivors, frontline workers, families of people who died, and even someone in space. So you really do get a well-rounded perspective of all the things going on. And I kept thinking about this author and the work that would have gone into gathering all of this information in these stories and compiling these stories. I think it's very well done. This was my second 5-star read of September, and it was a way to honor the people of 9/11. So those are all of the books that I read in September. I will be getting caught up, and I will be doing videos on my hauls, what I read in October. I will be doing the Reading Across Canada challenge. I'm behind on that. And I also have several book and author events to tell you about. So please stay tuned for all of that. Please let me know if you've read any of these books that I've talked about, or if you're interested in reading any of them. Do you agree or not on some of my thoughts? I'd love to hear all about it. And please let me know what you read in September. I know it was a while ago now, but let me know what your favorite read of the month was. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.